And good afternoon. I'm Melissa Tallman, Marketing and Membership Director here with the CPA. Welcome to the 2021 Coalition for a Prosperous America Annual Conference. Today we are in for a real treat. We offer our Buy American panel. I'd like to introduce to you our two co-chairs of the Buy American Committee at CPA. We have Greg Owens of Sherrill Manufacturing and Jim Stuber, author of What If Things Were Made in America Again. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon, Melissa. Thank you for having us. And thank you to Michael and Zach for putting together, and you for putting together this wonderful conference. I've been fascinated by some of the discussions over the last couple days. None more energetic than the labor issues discussion that we saw this morning. My friend Mike Dolan is always energetic. I'm not sure that Jim and I are going to be able to elevate the bar to that level of energy during the Buy American session. We'll try and make up for that with some great content and interesting information for everyone. So again, good afternoon. My name is Greg Owens, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sherrill Manufacturing, the only flatware or silverware manufacturer left in the United States. And today we have the pleasure and the distinct honor to be joined by three members of Congress, and Brad Markell of the Afl-Cio. And what we're going to talk about are Buy American issues and how they impact us and what we can do. So Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin is here to discuss a really cool topic, cool meaning country of origin labeling. She will be followed by Senator Lummis, of Wyoming, who will talk about another cool topic as it relates to beef and pork. And then we'll have a tape segment with Representative Claudia Tenney of New York, where we'll discuss the Spoons Act and other government procurement issues. And lastly, if he's able to join us, will be Brad, who is Executive Director of the Afl-Cio, Industrial Union Council, and a CPA board member, to discuss labor issues and the effect of globalization on workers. Demand for American-made products by the American consumer is what drives our business and our online sales at Liberty Tabletop. And I have seen firsthand what happened to our country as a result of manufacturing operations being shut down and production moved overseas, witnessing the devastation that it caused to our predecessor, Oneida Limited, our community, our friends, and our neighbors. Aside from the potential benefit to our company, I am personally dedicated to the cause of righting the wrongs that have occurred over the last 20 or 30 years and helping to restore the American industrial base that has been so instrumental in the development of our country and the well-being of our citizens. I joined CPA 5 years ago and have been involved in the organization as an active member, now co-chair of the Buy American Committee, along with my good friend Jim Stuber. And Jim, why don't you take it away, and glad to have you do the first couple sessions of our Buy America panel.
Well, thanks, Greg. My own interest in Buy American really started with my family, who all worked in the steel mills in Pittsburgh and Ohio. And it really bothered me watching all those jobs go overseas, but I never did anything about it until one night I had a light bulb moment that actually involved a light bulb that had the GE logo on it, and then underneath that, in all caps, the word China. And it just grabbed a hold of me, and so I ended up writing a book about why it was that GE was making its light bulbs and everything else seemed to be made somewhere else, and was that causing a problem? And I really added up the costs of these situations like the one Greg just described when Oneida went overseas. You know, how much harm did that all do? And it was really a grim picture, and the future seems to hold more of the same, except that I had this happy last chapter when I realized that, you know, consumers, if we're 70% of the economy, could solve this problem by changing some of our buying decisions. But we need a little help from the government. And even though this is something we can mostly do ourselves just by becoming label readers, there are some things we need to ask our government to do. And one of the great champions of those things has been our guest today, Senator Tammy Baldwin. So, Senator, welcome. So glad you're with us today.
Thank you so much, Jim. I'm delighted to join you.
Well, could you share a bit about your background and why you have been such a strong champion of Buy American?
Oh, certainly. Well, I have the great honor of representing the great state of Wisconsin. And we are a state that makes things. We get ranked usually as either one or two in the nation in terms of the percent of our workforce that is engaged in manufacturing. And yet I see all of the challenges there. But if you think of Wisconsin, you think of things like paper and engines and tools and ships, as well as brats, beer, and cheese, by the way. And you know those things about us because we have these iconic manufacturing industries, but there's been huge challenges. And so, especially when you talk about the purchasing power of the US government and how we have a responsibility to be good stewards of taxpayer dollars as we're making sure that our nation is secure and healthy during a pandemic, that I'll talk more about that in a moment. But it is really, really important that we produce the very things that keep us safe and healthy and secure.
Well, I second that. And you mentioned healthcare. The pandemic has really brought this into focus. You've echoed CPA's sentiments about the serious vulnerabilities we have in our healthcare supply chain. And I know you urged both the Trump and the Biden administrations to invoke the Defense Production Act to close those gaps and to restore our healthcare supply chain. And we're very pleased to see that this COVID relief package that just passed did include $10 billion for the Defense Production Act. Can you tell us more about your efforts to improve this domestic resiliency during these negotiations of the COVID relief package?
Absolutely. So, my interest in this topic predated the pandemic, but let's start with the early days of the pandemic. I remember so clearly the need throughout the state of Wisconsin and the country for things like N95 masks, for other hospital and surgical masks, for gloves, for gowns, for hand sanitizer, for ventilators, for when we got the tests developed, the swabs and the reagents and the testing kits themselves. And when you started looking at the supply chain for many of these needed items, they were from outside the United States. And, there was a lot of chaos also in everybody bidding against the next guy down the road, frankly, for these same things. And so literally we had police departments bidding against sheriff's departments in the same communities for the masks and things that they needed for first responders. The Defense Production Act should have been invoked thoroughly from the very beginning days of this pandemic. And I urged the former administration to do that. While they did in very isolated areas, they didn't for the most part. And so I was thrilled to see this investment being made in the American Rescue Plan, a $10 billion to fully unleash the potential of the DPA. So the Defense Production Act, sorry, it was just stuck. Now it came out. So let me just talk about a little way that it might impact a state like Wisconsin, or should have last year, but still could. We're the number one producer of paper in the United States. And some of those paper mills have closed in recent years because the companies have moved their mills overseas, and other stresses on the products that they make. What perfect opportunity to retool some of our paper producers to be able to make the type of paper-based fabrics that are used for the gowns and the surgical masks, and even start production in the US of N95 masks beyond the very limited production that we do have here domestically. What an opportunity that was just foregone. But not only that, but the Defense Production Act allows a centralized focus so that you don't have one hospital bidding against the one 20 miles away, and every public health department in the state bidding against each other, but instead a strategy to deploy all of these products and to strengthen the domestic industrial base at the same time. And that's just one narrow example. There's so many things we could have been ramping up production of here at home. And then I want to say that in and of itself, that's not enough, because a manufacturer isn't going to retool at great expense if they don't know they're going to have a customer. And that's where the federal government refilling and replenishing our stockpiles, assuring that there'll be a customer of last resort, if not first customer, would provide the certainty that business owners would need to make those changes.
Never. I think we thank you for your efforts. I know it was an uphill climb in the beginning. I really was scratching their heads. Why aren't we doing this? So thank you for that. And thank you also for authoring the Cool Online Act, which would require country of origin labeling when people are selling things on the internet. And
Yep.
Of course, the CPA was honored to strongly endorse that bill. Can you explain to our members why that's an important issue for workers and consumers?
Certainly, and I want to also thank you for having a lot of input in the drafting of the bill. This was something that probably was needed for a long time, but the pandemic, like so many other things, made very clear the need for country of origin labeling for online sales. And frankly, I have my own online shopping experience where when the package finally arrived and I looked at it, it was like, this is made in China? And I'm a Buy America person. So it was kind of shocking to me. So we have labeling laws that allow consumers to gather the information they need when they shop at a retailer. And yet online, a lot of those requirements, those labeling requirements, don't exist. And during a pandemic, when we were advised to stay home, to be safe, many people started changing their shopping habits. And I think post-pandemic, which I hope and pray is in the next few months, that we're looking at it in the rearview mirror, but I think a lot of people are going to keep those online shopping habits for ease and for all sorts of other reasons. And so getting this law passed so that people can be informed consumers as we move on is going to be a really important issue to see through.
Well, I surely hope perhaps this Congress will be the time when we can actually see that enacted, and we'll be empowering people to make that choice and to call it to their attention. Because now, the companies hide the ball and they try to sound as American as they can. And then you get that surprise when it shows up in your doorstep. So we're looking forward to working with you to see if we can't get that moving forward. And looking forward, Congress has a big infrastructure package that's very likely to be coming before you. Can you tell us about your efforts to see that in that infrastructure package that we're going to include strong Buy American policies so that we're not just passing a law to buy a bunch of stuff, from other countries?
Absolutely. So I've been involved in this arena, as you know, on a number of different levels, and especially with infrastructure, there are lots of gaps in our Buy America policy. So I think about, people sort of assume when we're tackling our infrastructure, certainly it's going to be with U.S. workers, right? But then you think of some of the components that go into, say, surface transportation infrastructure. And so many areas of that are not subject to Buy America rules. Well, think about the traffic lights and other lighting that illuminates our highways and byways. Think about some of the steel, one of the issues that you discussed at the outset. Those things can be imported, and we have to make sure that Buy America rules don't just apply to the things you immediately think of, but a lot of the ancillary things that are part of any infrastructure construction project. Secondly, one of the things that I've worked very earnestly on, especially since we just passed the American Rescue Package, but also as we pivot to look to the next American Recovery Package, the Build Back Better plan, the infrastructure plans, is closing a huge loophole that exists right now. So what is that loophole? That loophole is that as we engage in trade negotiations and complete trade deals with other countries, one of the things they often seek is the right to compete in our government procurement programs. And they get to compete as though they were Buy America companies, right? So companies in foreign countries. And the President of the United States has the authority to have an emergency exemption of those those treaty agreements to direct our taxpayer dollars, especially during an emergency and a pandemic, to domestic manufacturers, and even to provide incentives to create a pivot to manufacturing things that we don't currently manufacture in order to support our domestic industries. And that is critical right now because there's some 60 countries across the globe who can bid for contracts, try to win procurement, as though they were American companies, even though they might not employ a single U.S. worker or pay a single penny in U.S. taxes. And I think at least on an emergency basis, the president should look to closing those Buy America loopholes, and in the longer term, look at renegotiating some of those provisions.
Do you feel what's your pulse on Congress as far as strengthening these things that you were just talking about, on both sides of the aisle? Are you getting any sense of how the members are thinking about this?
So often we deal with these issues in a sort of piecemeal way. And so I have brought forward Buy America policies for, say, non-defense shipbuilding. I brought forth these policies for our drinking water and wastewater and other water infrastructure. This time, I think we're going to have a pretty broad infrastructure bill or bills. Who knows? And so we're going to have to get a lot more people educated on the importance of this throughout our ambitious plans. And we're also going to have to figure out what, I don't want to get into the weeds, but sometimes you have to, what process is going to be used to advance these. So is it going to be through budget reconciliation, or is it going to be through a different process? But regardless, I think it's really important that those who care deeply about strengthening our domestic capacity to provide what we need with our taxpayer dollars, people who support that, speak up now.
We hear you loud and clear. So here, I'll give you our commitment that starting today, the CPA members who are these small and medium-sized companies, their senators will be hearing from them and see if we can't start building toward that consensus. And we really look forward to working with you on these things in this coming Congress. And thanks so much for being with us today.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, I'm looking to Melissa to see if our next guest has arrived or if we should move on to Claudia Tenney's. Senator Lummis, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Jim. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
we're delighted to have you with us today. We wish we were there with you in Washington, but we're grateful that Melissa has arranged for all of this for us. We welcome you to the Senate and to the good work we can be doing. And we're just speaking with Senator Baldwin on one of the topics being country of origin labeling and how consumers want to know where things are made because they want to make that choice. And honestly, I think they have a right to know where their products are coming from, especially their food products. And just by way of background for our listeners, we know that Congress in 2001 said, yeah, we really want you to be able to, when you're buying things at the retail level, when you're buying fresh produce and meats and nuts, to know what the country of origin is for those things. But because of a WTO case, beef and pork got exempted from it. They're not there anymore. And so now American consumers don't have that ability to know where their beef is coming from. It's an issue dear to the hearts of many of us at CPA, and we understand it's dear to your heart as well. So can you fill us in kind of on what that has meant for ranchers in your state and really for consumers nationwide?
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed listening to Tammy Baldwin earlier about her remarks about online cool, and I applaud her for that approach. I think a lot of us who started shopping online way more frequently than we had before COVID were very surprised to see how many things are made overseas that we were purchasing. And it is an alarm. It's alarming because we don't know when we're buying where the product that we're buying is coming from. Now, if we know and we make a conscious choice to buy a product from overseas, that is a choice. That's a consumer choice. But when you don't have the option to know, you're only dealing with a component of your ability to make a decision. So I really applaud Senator Baldwin's efforts there. And I don't think anything can be more important than knowing where our food is coming from. We're consuming that. The locavore movements in the United States have even brought it down to the local level, trying to buy from people that you can actually identify their farm or their ranch, their ag operation, so you can have a full appreciation for the manner in which their beef, pork, or fruits and vegetables are being produced. It's I think a very healthy thing for the American consumer, and I think it's a healthy thing for the American producer, because then we can produce a product that we know has direct consumer appeal because we can get direct feedback. So I'm a big supporter of Cool. I did, because of the World Trade Organization's decisions to block previous Cool. I consented to that. And then during COVID, when it became clear that our supply chains were being interrupted because we acquire so many key products, be it pharmaceuticals or rare earth minerals or clothing and other produced goods from overseas, I think it alarmed a lot of us that we're so dependent on foreign countries that we've put ourselves in a position that we just don't want to be in, and we have to reevaluate the position we're in. And I think that's doubly important with regard to what we're consuming, what we're eating, what we're putting in our bodies, and that our children and our elderly parents are consuming as well. Now, I'm a lifelong rancher. I'm proud of the product that I produce, that my brother and sister and I produce on our ranch, and we would happily put the product that we're selling into the marketplace up against any competition. I think that's a classic American trait. It's certainly a trait of American agriculture. We want to produce the product that is most desirable to be consumed. And we're all proud of those products, and we want to advertise that. So I think that it's time to look internally at ways that we can achieve cool and still meet our trade obligations. You know, I wasn't in the Congress when the most recent trade deal passed between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. But I think it provided some opportunities for us to engage in country of origin labeling in a way that still protects our trade obligations. And so I want to pursue that along with Senator Baldwin and other people who care about this. America can balance our own country's ag trade needs and still respect and protect the needs of our allies to the north and south. So I see these as American issues. That's why it's so much fun that you have a bipartisan conversation going today. It's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's a priority for both parties and people in both parties. We need more domestic production. As I mentioned, rare earth minerals, pharmaceuticals. These are really important, especially to my state of Wyoming, because we actually have rare earth minerals, and we're a resource the United States should be using instead of purchasing overseas from countries like China. And I think we saw during this whole COVID experience during the last year that the American people are committed to helping out their neighbors during tough times. You'd see someone would go on TV putting together a fund to pay restaurant workers whose jobs had been held in abeyance. And they were raising lots of money because everybody in the United States could see the real harm that goes along with an American losing their job. And I think that extends to all kinds of jobs and all the production of all kinds of products. So buying local is an important priority for many Americans. And the nationwide emphasis on buying American that you're promoting and others it just seems to be growing. And I think it grew in importance during the last year's shutdown, perhaps more than any other time in recent history. So I know I like to shop for things like wine, that I can see the different areas of California where it's coming from. When I was a little girl, I toured the Pendleton, Oregon wool mills where they were making wool products. Well, now those products aren't made in the United States anymore. It was a source of pride for that community. And of course it still is, because that's where the mothership of the company is. But the manufacturing is being done overseas using wool obtained from overseas. And these are the kind of things that if Americans said, hey, I love your product, can we have it produced in America? And then again, the source of pride, the source of jobs, the source of America being self-sustaining. We're so proud, I am as an energy producing state, that America has become able to sustain its own energy production for the first time in a long time. In fact, we're to a point where we can export some of our energy production because we have enough of our own. Those are the kind of things we should be proud of. The American people are proud of that. We want to be able to do that with other things as well. So we know we're not dependent on other countries, especially when it comes to things that are related to our national security. And I think food security is a national security issue. I think the safety of what we consume is important to us. And heck, I consume products from overseas. Sometimes berries in the winter that come from Chile and stuff. But I know it. I see it on the label that I'm buying a berry that came from Chile and not from the United States. We should all know that when we go to the store and make those choices. And that's why I applaud what you're doing. and want to join forces with Tammy, Baldwin, and other members of Congress who are as concerned about these issues as I am. So, Jim, thanks for letting me participate today. Count me as an ally. And thank you. Thanks for just putting this forum together so we can draw attention to the importance of buying American and knowing that you're buying American.
Oh, thank you, Senator. It's so great to hear your thoughts on all of that and to count you as an ally in these efforts, because this last year really has opened a lot of eyes. And I think that, consumers really have other considerations than price. Yeah. And they do want to buy that local thing. They'd like to know what farm that was raised on. So I think there's a great opportunity right now that we can take these trends and do something with them. So we really look forward to working with you this year and next and see if we can't get something done.
Thanks very much.
Well, what a great opportunity, Greg. I know you had the opportunity to speak with Representative Claudia Tenney, who had kind of some emergencies she had to deal with, but got on with you. Can we maybe tee up and listen to your conversation?
Sure. I think Melissa's going to get on that. Yes, I sat down with Claudia earlier this week. She's the representative from New York's 22nd Congressional District, the district that I live in and our business is located in. So I've known her for several years, and I know that she's always been a staunch advocate for Made in America issues. She would be a strong supporter of the cool bills that we just talked about, but particularly Made in America issues that involve small businesses. She actually grew up in a family that ran a small business and is very familiar with the issues surrounding that. So, Melissa, if you're ready, let's tee up that conversation and let the audience enjoy her remarks. Matt and I set out to reinvent Sherrill Manufacturing back in the 2010 timeframe after Oneida Limited, our largest customer, shifted all their production to Asia. We fortunately had a government contract through GSA. This contract provided the base of revenue that Sherrill Manufacturing needed that allowed us to survive and thrive as America's only flatware manufacturer. During this time frame, we have supported American steel by buying only American-made stainless steel to make our knives, forks, and spoon, thus supporting the steel industry, which is critical for our national defense. New York Representative Claudia Tenney has been instrumental in promoting issues that have helped our company succeed and preserve American jobs. Central to this effort was her development and introduction of the Spoons Act. Claudia, welcome. And would you like to talk a little bit about the Spoons Act and how it all came about?
Thank you, Greg. It's an honor to be on with everyone. I had a life-changing day in August of 2016 when I was running for Congress. And I had the opportunity to go to Sherrill Manufacturing and meet Greg Owens and Matt Roberts, who were the founders, who were doing exactly what I thought we could do to save our country, and particularly upstate New York, which I call the Rust Belt of New York. We were where all manufacturing was started. The first shovel in the ground for the Erie Canal was in my district. We began the Industrial Revolution. We also have Revere Copper was founded in our district in 1801, I believe, because I know Brian O'Shaughnessy's on this call and he's going to correct me. But it's been a monumental effort, and we saw what had to happen to bring manufacturing back. And you guys have really led the way in our community as the sole manufacturer of stainless steel. It was hard to believe. And even when we brought you to the showcase with the president, he was stunned to find out you were the only American manufacturer. But you brought back Oneida Limited, which was really an iconic name, not just in our community, but around the world. And to come back and do what they did using their old equipment, bringing back the old factory that everybody in our area fondly remembers for generations of people who've worked there, was really, it was like a eureka moment. I said, this is exactly what we have to do. Two entrepreneurs using American products, investing in steel and American manufacturing, and now trying to get American jobs back. And people thinking that Americans can't do anything anymore. We have to send that overseas. And so we came up with the Spoons Act with your help, although my team, I got to give them a lot of credit, We went back and forth on catchy titles, and support procurement of our nation's stainless steel became the Spoons Act. And it was tough. I tried to get it passed through a Republican-dominated House. And, a lot of people were very free trade, not fair traders. And they really didn't understand how important this bill was. And so I have to credit you for being persistent even after I lost. My successor was able to get it passed. And now we're looking at enhancements to the Spoons Act and continuing to let people grow in our communities, grow jobs in the United States. Because one thing that you and Matt have shown is Americans make the best products, and we need to bring our manufacturing back. It's so good for American economy, and it's so good for our world to have American jobs back here. And we need to focus on doing everything we can to combat so much of the job harvesting that's been going on with China, basically getting a free pass on trade. So I just want to say I'm grateful for you. You guys brought this tremendous idea to me through your company, and we're glad that we were ultimately able to get it passed.
Well, thank you very much for all of your efforts. And there are clearly many opportunities for the government to help bolster American manufacturing. And one of them is to ensure that taxpayer money is spent on American-made goods and services. Laws already exist that will do this, including the Berry Amendment, Buy America, Buy American Acts. There are certain executive initiatives. Build Back Better is one of them that's currently running. And there's strong Buy American provisions within other legislation, such as the COVID stimulus bill and the upcoming infrastructure bill, hopefully. So for decades, these laws have been shoved aside, filled with loopholes, and largely ignored. A good example of this is the $250,000 threshold where Berry kicks in, which is what would make the Spoons Act take effect. And since that act passed, we've been asking members of the Department of Defense, we've been asking buyers, we've been asking contract specialists, members of Congress, if a contract is awarded that's above that threshold, let's say they're redoing the mess hall in an Army base, and it's a $500,000 contract, but one of the line items is flatware, and that's below the $250,000 threshold. Does Berry apply? And nobody has seemed to be able to answer this question. And I'm hopeful, I'd like to get your comments on that, hopeful that we can work together in this Congress to get an answer and make sure that these laws that already exist are being enforced.
Yeah, that looks like thanks for the question. It's very interesting that it wouldn't apply all the way through just because so many of our contracts are with small businesses like yours, where, 250,000 threshold is a fairly small contract when you look at how much the federal government spends, especially in defense. But when it comes to a local contractor like your company, that's a big contract. And so let's look into that. You were suggesting maybe that there was a legislative fix to this. We may be able to go through and get guidance through the Treasury, as we've talked about in prior conversations. We definitely need to make sure that we are continuing on this Made in America preservation, because I'm worried that if you move that threshold, smaller businesses like yours and other startups and entrepreneurs in other industries may also fall through the cracks and not be able to get the protection that Berry and the Spoons Act and other companies are able to access. So I'm happy to look into that and reach out to the treasurer. And maybe some other people in this call and on this panel would like to have that looked at too. Our small business community is everything in our community. Unlike maybe some other parts of the country, 94% of the workers in my district are from small businesses, just like Sherrill Manufacturing. So we want to make sure that you're continuing to thrive and grow. Of course, we'd love to see you be one of the larger businesses, and we know you're on your way there. But that's definitely something we could look at if it's possible through legislation again, or maybe we could get some rules in Treasury changed to make sure that we're enforcing the Berry Amendment and other Buy American amendments through that process.
All right. Well, thank you very much for all your efforts. And again, congratulations on your victory. We're glad to have you back in Congress and looking forward to the next versions of the Spoons Act and much more to come. Do you have anything else, any other comments on Made in America or any issues that might be relevant to our audience?
I just want to say thank you to you and you and Matt, and for what you do, and all the small businesses and entrepreneurs out there, and the people who take a decided effort to focus on Made in America and how important it is to support USA efforts. And also to Brian O'Shaughnessy, who's out there, who runs the and is the, formally ran, I guess he's still the chairman of the board of Revere. I know he's on the call too. And so many of you have stood out to protect Made in America, and understand I'm really grateful for the Coalition for a Prosperous America, because you send me emails every single day about the status and what's going on. This is a great issue where we can find bipartisan solutions. We have so many areas where we don't agree, but one thing I think we can all agree on, and I see Republicans actually moving more toward understanding the idea of fair trade and the idea of making America the place where manufacturing needs to be stronger, and making sure that China isn't harvesting from us. So I'm grateful for your efforts. I want to continue to do whatever we can to support America. And I want to thank CPA and everyone on this call, including the other legislators. And let's continue to bring our jobs back, and let's continue to employ Americans. We really need this more than anything now during this pandemic. We are merging out, and you're going to be the secret to our success. And so thank you to everybody. I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. Hey, Jim. Well, I guess one thing that I would have to say after listening to our segment so far is, if you didn't know who was a Republican, who was a Democrat, you'd really have a hard time trying to figure it out. And what a wonderful aspect of this issue that the two of us have been working on so long is that this is not really a partisan issue. It's an American issue. And I think that's the way we've all treated it. And that's the way we're seeing it viewed on Capitol Hill. And it's just very refreshing to be involved in something that is so nonpartisan. With that, I'd like to turn it back over to Jim, who's going to introduce our next guest of the panel and talk about labor issues.
Thanks, Greg. And I echo your sentiments. It really is so encouraging and refreshing to hear members of Congress from both sides of the aisle, coalescing around an understanding of the effects these bad policies of the past have been having on America, and that there's another way forward. And now we'd like to hear another angle on that other way forward. Brad, you serve as executive director of the Afl-Cio's Industrial Union Council. Can you tell us a bit about the council and what are the priorities for labor pertaining to Buy American?
Thank you, Jim, and hello to everybody. Yes, so the Industrial Union Council is the manufacturing arm of the Afl-Cio. The council itself is made up of the presidents, the national presidents of unions in manufacturing. Those unions have about 4 million members and about 1.3 million or so directly in manufacturing. And of course, just following up on what Greg said, here I am. I work for the president's office of the Afl-Cio, and I don't disagree with a single thing I heard so far in this session. And it's a wonderful bipartisan issue. It's a jobs issue. It's a national security issue. And I feel like we have turned the corner on this. It wasn't too long ago when we had Republicans who were free traders and Democrats who were free traders, and they weren't so keen on Buy America or Buy American. And now, through the efforts of labor, through the efforts of CPA, through the efforts of so many of the businesses that are involved in CPA, we really have turned the page. And I don't think there's any going back. And so really want to just make a few remarks and jump around a little bit in what I'm saying. Of course, for us, this is a jobs issue. And I think the first thing a lot of labor folks would say is, hey, this is our money in the first place. So why don't we have a say in where we're spending it? And why shouldn't we be creating high quality jobs and supporting companies and manufacturers and people that have equity and have borrowed to invest in their business and bought machine tools and set them up and are ready to go. Just as a little aside, I will say that the issue of cool is a labeling, not a Buy America issue, but labor is 100% behind cool. The food and commercial workers support it, and it is just completely ridiculous that I cannot go to the grocery store and decide where my meat has been produced and raised, as Brother Bullard would make sure we want to say. the Trump administration made a lot of good strides on Buy America. There was a very, very solid executive order around defense supply chain. We had raised that with them, and they were extremely responsive on that. We have situations where we can't produce some of our military goods without imported components, and that just cannot be. And it's happy that the last EO that the Trump administration left on Buy America, the Biden administration left it in place. There's a new Biden administration executive order on Buy America, and there's an executive order on supply chains. And I think we should think about those two executive orders working together. We've all been. Let me back that up. Not all of us. The public, I think, has been shocked to find out the things that we couldn't make. That the simple N95 mask that used to be not quite a dime a dozen, but maybe $10 a dozen at Home Depot, that we all wore for our shop projects or sanding and things like that, that we really couldn't make enough of them here. And those of us that have been in the manufacturing sector have watched this happen over many, many years, and it's been sickening. But I think that public attention around what we needed in the supply chain for the Corona crisis has really given us a little wind in our sails. I think it's very important that we are, once we do the supply chain analysis, that we make sure we're investing and making space for companies to invest into those gaps that we find. And the way we make the space is to let them know that there's a market here with the federal government, with state governments that are buying with a federal nickel in the pot, everything from N95 masks to steel to buses and just all sorts of things. When it comes to the Buy America calculation, one of the things the Biden executive order proposes is to sort of tighten up the calculation of the administration. These agencies have passed out waivers like candy on Halloween, and it's driven just a bunch of us crazy. Actually, it was a Republican in the Obama administration, former Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood, who decided, he was sick of these waivers and sick of seeing just too many things going out the door, and frankly, not enough process around the waiver, right? So he put a process in place at Department of Transportation where they wouldn't just accept the waiver, they charged the Department of Commerce, and many of you know about the NIST MEP Manufacturing Extension Program, to go out and go to small manufacturers who maybe, and Jim, I don't know how you run your business, but I'm guessing you're not sitting around watching the Federal Register for everything that comes down the pike, and to actually make an effort to reach out to the thousands and thousands of American manufacturers that have capacity to say, hey, can we make this here? So we're very hopeful that we'll get not just the Department of Transportation to do that, but the whole government to do that. Another thing I think I really want to emphasize is, the calculation for the content has to be upgraded. There are a lot of loopholes. The one that drives me craziest is called roll-up. This is something we face in trade all the time, where something comes in and say it's 70% at the component stage. When it goes into the product, it gets counted at 100%. And that's just an artificial elevation of the national content. And the Biden administration is going to do a report. We're all way in. I know that the CPA staff and Michael have been talking to them about it. And we're going to get a chance to weigh in before that finally gets decided. I want to say a bit about infrastructure, because that is talked about here. We are getting ready to spend a few $1 trillion on infrastructure. And I think everybody recognizes we need to spend money on infrastructure. It's actually something that the founders put in the Constitution, that the federal government should spend money on infrastructure. It's one of the few really direct instructions that the federal government got from the founders in the Constitution. I think a little known aspect of infrastructure spending is that the job potential for infrastructure programs is higher in manufacturing than it is in construction. If we source everything here, you actually create more jobs in manufacturing with an infrastructure package than you do construction jobs. It's really, really important that the steel that's being used all over this country is going to be American made. And some of the manufactured products that Senator Baldwin mentioned, water infrastructure. We need to really expand our coverage on the water side. And the pumps that are made are very high value added products. I know we have a number of folks in the steel industry. The tubular products are some of the highest value added, and I'm hoping high margin products in the steel industry, and that should all be made here in the United States. It's really important to understand that every time the federal government spends money, it's an opportunity to support jobs in America, and we need to maximize those opportunities. Let me say a little bit about, I know, we have some clean energy companies involved with CPA, and one of the things that's been driving the labor movement crazy is the sourcing of especially solar, but also wind products. We don't make very much in the way of solar panels here. We make, obviously, we've got a prominent and favored thin film manufacturer in Toledo, but we import way too much stuff. The Biden administration wants to change the profile of the energy that the federal government is buying. That's not a product. They're not going to buy wind turbines or buy solar panels and own them. DOD does just a little bit of that on the solar side, but they buy it as a service through a power purchase agreement. We are really pressing them to get behind that service contract and make sure that the service contract has goods behind it, and those goods should be made in America. That goes for solar panels is the thing that I have been pressing really hard on. I know that the CPA staff and leadership is on top of it. It goes for food services too, right? Most of the time that you see government cafeterias or the Department of Defense, they're purchasing a service from a food service provider. And we have been pushing them to say, wait a minute, just because it's a service contract, are you buying American food? You know, we have unionized packing is highly unionized in the United States. Baking is highly unionized in the United States. And, you know, our bakers union knows that we had a big kerfuffle where the Oreos were moved from Chicago to Mexico. The government just kept buying them. You know, they were showing up all over the place in the Senate cafeteria, for God's sake. And so as the government is purchasing services, we all have to realize there's a product behind those services, and we want that to be made in America too. The last thing I think I want to talk about is this whole sort of technology area. Critical minerals is one. You know, we really, the Trump Department of Energy, I think, did a good job and left the Biden Department of Energy in a good spot on critical minerals. But, you know, there's another lever here. And this is why I mentioned cool. Yes, there's Buy America, but there are just so many levers that we need to pull on. And one of the things that I'm really hot to trot on is making sure that research that is paid for through public dollars results in those products falling off here. There's another kind of waiver for that research. It's called a Bayh-Dole waiver. And through the Bayh-Dole waiver, you're supposed to make the stuff that is invented through public support for research here, but you can get a Bayh-Dole waiver pretty easily on that stuff. So let's go back to the solar panels, and they're being, dominated by the Chinese. I think a lot of folks know that. If you haven't seen it, I think we can get it to everybody. There is a problem with the supply of the polysilicon that's going into solar panels. 1/3, and maybe according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance this year, 50% of the world's polysilicon is made in the forced labor region of China. And it's not just about the forced labor, because they have a whole subsidy program of making sure that they get cheap machinery, cheap energy. It's very energy intensive, that there are no pollution laws. Making solar wafers can be very chemical intensive. So there are pollution issues associated with it. But the thing that sticks in the craw and doesn't get enough public attention is that a bunch of that technology was paid for by American taxpayers through the Department of Energy. In the 2010s, that publicly funded research brought the cost of solar cells, not the thin film, but the cells, down by about 80-90%. But somehow we make almost nothing here when it comes to solar cells. We need to really tighten up that aspect of it, because when it comes to lithium-ion batteries, solar cells, the advanced thermoplastics that are making up wind turbine blades, and that's, wind turbines can get bigger and bigger and better as long as a blade doesn't bend enough to crash into the tower, and then we have a problem. But that's all government research. We want all that stuff to fall off in the United States, to be made by American companies. And if we start getting those sort of end use components, the turbines, the blades, the amount of work that is going to fall lower in the supply chain is just stupendous. And so it's a big deal. And I couldn't be more grateful that the work that CPA has done, and the truly bipartisan interest that we have in this issue. I feel like we're going to get something done here in the next couple of years.
It's exciting times, Brad. It really is. And boy, just, what a list of issues. There's so much to be done. One thing that struck me, we have these two great consumers here, the government, federal, state, local governments, and then the American individual consumer. And, we want to bring both of those buying powers to bear on this issue. And you were mentioning infrastructure, and it reminds me of some of the research I did writing my book, where China lends a country the money to build an infrastructure project, and then they use all Chinese components and materials. The Chinese even send mostly Chinese workers to build the darn thing. But, we may not be importing Chinese workers, but we're really taking part in kind of neo-colonial relationship with China. We're building infrastructure, but they're sending us all of the things to do that with. So much of this just seems like common sense. And I'm hoping that some of the trends are in the right direction here, both on the government buying side, but also on the consumer buying side. I know Richard Trumka was talking recently about the collective buying power of union members and American consumers. And when we can bring that collective buying power to bear, we can have results, because we're the ones demanding that those products be made in the United States. So this is where the country of origin labeling comes in on the beef and food products, but on all these other products. And we look forward to working with you, on this whole range of issues, because I just think that the beginning of the 117th Congress, this was a bad year we just had, but it opened a lot of eyes, and I think it's opening a lot of opportunities. So thanks so much for being with us today. To be continued.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, and fantastic conference.
Thank you guys very much for joining us today. I really do appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and close this out. You can reach these individuals during the networking hour at one of the session roundtables of Let's Talk Buy American. As always, you can also go ahead and enjoy the Buy American committee. Reach out to us at prosperousamerica.org for more information and to get more involved in the Buy America process. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Brad.
Jim. Thank you, Brad.
Take care, Greg.
At this point, I would like to go ahead and welcome you all to go ahead and stay right onto the stage. We're going to go ahead and welcome our closing ceremony, and we have a guest speaker doing agriculture talk. Again, I'd like to go ahead and thank our sponsors, MFGgear. Visit them at mfggear.com. IT Guidepoint, you can visit them at itguidepoint.com. SK International, Modex, the Concilio Group, and then additionally, I'd like to thank Liberty Tabletop, MadeItAmericaAgain.com, Rebuilding Manufacturing, a book by Michelle Nash Hoff, The Key to American Prosperity. You can purchase that right on Amazon. Also, MadeInAmericaB2B.com and then MadeInAmerica.org. Please visit these sponsors to go ahead and learn more of their products, services, and their adventures into American prosperity. Thank you for joining us on the Buy American panel.
I think I'm supposed to sign off on the other one, or are we